although Jews are typically viewed predominantly as urban dwellers, the presence of a large Jewish population in villages was, in fact, one of the most distinctive features of East European Jewry. The main reason for this ruralization of the Jewish population was the massive entrance of Jews into the production and selling vodka to local peasants in the early modern age, the so-called propination system. Since the transformation of Eastern Europe into the granary of Europe in the early modern age, the cultivation of grain for export became the main form of agriculture. Because of the differences in grain prices between Eastern and Western Europe, grain shipment to the Baltic ports was very profitable business. But this was also very costly and insecure option. Vodka actually appeared in this region as a device to deal with large surplus of grain, especially in the areas where rivers don't flow to the Baltic Sea, as for example in Ukraine when they float to the south. So its production and sale to the local population soon became the cheapest way for the landowner to convert grain into cash. Jews took over this sector of economy for two reasons: their close relations with Polish magnates and their ability to pay in advance large sums of money for the leasehold, which was a great thing in a society agrarian society, always short of cash. The process of ruralization of Eastern Europe Jewry had far-reaching social, cultural, and even religious implications, far beyond the subject of the Lord's Jews and Lord's taverns, which is the main subject of research. In taking over this sector of economy, Jews displaced, for example, hereditary peasant leaseholders in Poland and in Lithuania, and Orthodox and Greek Catholic married priests in Ukraine and Belarus, causing an acute problem for the latter, who had to support their large families, and leasing taverns and inns provided for them secure source of income. The married priests ousted by the Jews often transgressed prohibitions to sell liquor. These constant violations of Lord's monopoly on propination for release to the Jews often created favorable conditions for soaring mutual violence. Jews sometimes even brought Lord's Cossacks into priest's house, beating him up and confiscating his property. The legend about the Jews' leasing of the Orthodox churches arose out of the widespread practice of sealing the churches as a sanction against the violation of the Lord's propination rights by a priest. Rural Jewish innkeepers tended to live in isolation from the Jewish communities in market towns, and so were distant from established educational systems and communal religious life. Close contacts and mutual life experience led to better acquaintance between Jews and Christians and to mutual cultural influences. Rural Jews usually knew local Slavic languages, as some of them even did not know Yiddish, shared often with the Slavic co-villagers common beliefs and superstitions. Thus, in the 17th century, many Christian pregnant women went to some Jewish witches and healers in order to obtain from them some magic amulets. And in the 18th century, on the contrary, many Jewish women obtained information about their missing husbands' whereabouts from the Slavic female astrologers. Common life in close rural microcosm led even to a friendship, tragic love stories, and of course conversion not only to Christianity but also to Judaism. Since women and girls usually served vodka to the customers in the rural tavern, they became especially exposed to close contact with the non-Jewish population. Thus, in the 19th century, for example, a daughter of a rural Jewish tavern keeper fled with a customer to a neighboring town, not forgetting to take her jewelry with her. There are many other references to sexual relations between Jews and non-Jews in this problematic atmosphere. The cultural background served to a large extent as the social basis for the spread of the Hasidic movement in the late 18th century. Rural Jews became the most receptive target audience of Hasidic preachers, since the tzaddik served as an intermediary between uneducated and ignorant rural Jews and the god. However, the Hasidic movement had only limited success in Grand Duchy of Lithuania. This peculiarity of Hasidic geography can be possibly explained by the difference in duration of rural leaseholds in various parts of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Jewish leaseholds of the propination rights were usually long-term contracts in Poland and Ukraine, and short-term contracts in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. This difference can possibly solve the long-standing problem of the sweeping success of the Hasidic movement in Ukraine and Poland, and its only marginal penetration into Belarus and Lithuania. The permanent rural population of Ukraine was cut off from urban centers of education, and so was rapidly enchanted by Hasidic alternative worship. While the Jews of Belarus and Lithuania, spending only a few years of their life in the countryside, managed to keep abreast of traditional Jewish education. Relations between the Jewish leaseholders and peasants were rather complicated. On the one hand, the Jewish leaseholder was an important figure in a village, and the rural inn served as a focal point of social life, providing often the only place different social strata to interact, from nobles to priests, monks, nuns even, and local peasants. On the other hand, the Jewish leaseholders was seen in the eyes of the peasants as a representative, often a sole one, of their lord, and also sometimes as a part of the upper strata of the village's leadership. Records of the rural communal courts also preserved many vivid references to the everyday interaction between rural Jews and local peasants. Usually, those cases reflect drinking habits of the latter. Thus, in the 18th century, the miller in the ecclesiastical village used to sell to the Jewish innkeeper various implements of his mill, such as bolts, railings, etc., bringing the mill to a standstill. The community asked the manager of the village to replace the drunkard with another miller. The latter, however, swore on the cross that he will never again enter the Jewish inn, and only his wife will be allowed to bring him some vodka as a remedy in case of his illness. Gradual decline of the propination system began with the opening of the Black Sea ports after the annexation of Crimea and Kanaat in 1783 by Catherine the Great. Thus, only with the foundation of new ports on the northern shore of the Black Sea did Russia begin to compete seriously in European grain markets, and the profitability of grain export rose dramatically. The final collapse of the propination system occurred only with the construction of the railway networks in European Russia in the second half of the 19th century. Cheap, uninterrupted, and swift transportation by rail made grain export for the first time more profitable for local landlords than its use in the local production of alcoholic beverages, while rural Jews abandoned their centuries-long occupation for innkeeping in favor of agriculture and grain trade. This process of transition of the rural Jews from innkeeping to grain trade and agricultural preceded introduction of the state monopoly for the production and selling of alcohol in western provinces of Russian Empire in 1897. And in fact, it made possible the smooth introduction of the state monopoly rather than vice versa. Thank you.